Well, first things first, how are you?
I just woke up. I'm great. My alarm literally went off 10 minutes ago because
Okay.
I overslept. I'm sorry.
Did you have your coffee yet or not, not yet?
We're speed dialing with the caffeine.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
This will
Um,
work.
yeah. Well, before we get into the album, then let's start with some simple questions. When you started as a young kid in this whole music thing, what was the dream, so to say?
Well, that's the thing. I didn't start as a young kid. I started really late.
Okay. Okay.
Um, I didn't start touring until 23, I think.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. My history is kind of interesting. I mean, I was always a fan of this type of music as a teenager,
Mhm.
but it wasn't until my later years that I got an opportunity to actually like participate.
Right.
So when I did, I went full throttle, you know. I went all in. So I didn't start I don't think I started like learning how to scream until I was like 21. And I
Oh,
would always sing with my parents until like my whole life, but music wasn't really a part of my life until not too long ago.
what changed then? Before kind of, what made you get into, well, using your vocals in a different way, using your voice in a
Uh
different way?
well, back in like I think it was like 2011. I was at a point in my life where I was kind of bored.
What were you
well,
doing? What kind of work?
well, I had like a not just a career change, but kind of like I kind of hit like a wall with what I wanted to do with my life, and I just started to I tried something different, and I needed like a creative outlet. And I think one day in the car a long time ago, I figured out how to scream, and I was like, "Hey, I'm gonna keep up at this." It was at the time it was a hobby, and I was doing YouTube covers for like 2 years, from like 2011
Sure.
until 2013. And then eventually I feel like I had developed like a skill set. I did like 200 YouTube covers like back then, and a guy found me on there. I'm trying to tell a really long story in a very short amount of time,
Fair enough.
because it's really not that interesting of a story. I just kept that a hobby, and it got me here.
Well, let me ask you this then,
Yeah, somebody found me on YouTube basically.
because I always find this interesting, especially when people start later within any field.
Hmm.
Because you were working towards something, and then, like you said, you felt unsatisfied or you wanted to do something different.
Right.
How come? What were you feeling at that point? Why did you feel you needed a change?
Well, I was 23 or so at that time,
Mhm.
and as my mom would joke around, she always said, "You already done growing your whole way." um, so I just feel like I didn't have a creative outlet because before that, I was a swimmer. I was an
Okay.
athlete for a long time. So there was nothing like I wasn't doing anything that had given me any drive or
Mm.
creative direction. So I had always been a fan of music forever, and I always thought being a singer would be really cool, or being a musician. So I took any opportunity that I found to kind of like capitalize on that. And it just ended up being this.
And you mentioned doing all those YouTube covers,
Hmm.
and it might have been before, but was there a point where you felt, well, I can actually do this. I can actually sing, and I can actually make a
um,
noise that I'm happy with in a way.
yeah. Well, I don't think, I think there was. I know one day, when you're in the car and you like want to participate to whatever it is. Well, for
Mhm.
me, it was just always screaming. So I was like, well, I might as well try. And one day I remember one day going, wait a second. I I this is today is different. Like something feels different. And I think something just clicked. And I was like, I think I just figured out how to do what these guys do. And I just kept at it because I got really excited.
And well, in that sense, because was Texas in July then the first real band that you were in?
Kind of. I had a local band,
Okay.
but that was like for a couple months, and we had done like 5 or 6 shows ever.
Okay, because I can imagine then getting thrown into that, and that must have been kind of a baptism
I
of fire in
I
a way.
literally have a tattoo of a wolf like being thrown to the wolves, and the first single for that band was Cry Wolf. So yeah, that's the perfect use of that word right there, thrown in the fire from the wolves. I was.
Looking back then, what was? Can you share one thing that you've learned from that experience that still sticks with you today?
Oh my God, so many things. One thing.
Well, just anything that pops into your mind now.
They're all cliche. I don't know. The journey to get to what you want in life is like always so crazy. So
Mhm.
just enjoy it. Like it's never gonna be easy. It's never gonna be exactly what you want, but it's always worth it.
Well, that makes sense because what I
I
hear
I
a
could
lot from
never have predicted this ever.
well, because what I hear from people is that being a touring musician is not for everybody. It takes a lot of not only skill to be able to do it, but it's very exhausting from what I hear. So you need to have that passion and to keep
Oh
going.
yeah.
So especially those first years of grinding, what was that like for
I'm
you?
beat up. My body hurts.
Well, you were an athlete, so you must have been able to take it a little bit.
Hey, that only helped early mornings and my lung capacity, and that's it.
Fair enough. Well, that's an interesting thing because I didn't even make the connection. But
Being a swimmer,
yeah, did
yeah,
that help vocally?
100%. But then I went to Europe and I picked up cigarettes.
Oh, so we ruined you.
It's all your fault.
Well, let's move on
Well,
to. Oh, good.
do you want to know something funny about that? When I got there, I was like, oh my God, everybody smokes marijuana. Because I didn't know that you guys rolled cigarettes. So I assumed everybody was rolling joints in the middle of the road.
Well,
So
technically, you can still do that, but
yeah. But so when I found out it was tobacco, I was like, oh.
right. Yeah,
My mind was blown.
it's weird when you first as a kid. I mean, when I think back of a lot of that stuff, I mean, people were smoking in trains and everywhere. It's really
It's
weird to
everywhere.
imagine that only being about 20 years ago that it was just everywhere, and now it's very there's a stigma to it almost like. Um, well, let's move towards the new record then, because
Yeah, go ahead.
this is kind of a fast forward through your background, but when kind of was it around 2016? Because I think I read somewhere that you knew the guys from the band before that, right?
Texas in July, went on tour with them in
Okay.
2014. And then I got a call from Jesse around August of 2015. I did record a drift with them in the studio in October. I did the farewell tour for Texas in July. And then in February, I was on tour again with ERRA.
Okay.
like back to back.
What was the biggest adjustment for you to make going from one band to the other?
More people on stage.
Okay. Okay.
More people on stage, and now I had Jesse to like participate with the vocals, which was actually turned out to be really nice and a nice not substitution. Well, a nice addition to what I was doing, you know.
Well, is that in terms of dynamics, but or also in
Mm-hmm.
terms of just being able to share those duties with somebody?
Both for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it was nice. And sometimes it's hard to be a one-man show, you know.
Well, I can also imagine. I'm not a vocalist, but if you're screaming like you do for an hour, hour and a half,
a lot of pressure too.
Exactly. So I can imagine that some switch ups are quite welcome.
Well, I sound bad today, but Jesse sounds great, so don't look at me.
But how did you kind of figure out who was going to sing what then? Was it kind of immediately apparent that you were going to take all the heavy bits and
Oh, I mean, was always assumed that I was always going to scream. As far as like being the one that kind of leads the crowd, I think that depends on the band, but I think it's still kind of assumed that the person without the instrument should take most of that work, because he's got a lot to do still. Sing, he probably would be overwhelmed if he had to do singing, guitar, and lead the mosh pit. You know.
Well, let me ask you this then: what makes, in your opinion, a good frontman?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably a lot of things, but I would say at a show, performing your stuff correctly, but also knowing how to read the room, read the crowd, know how to get a crowd pumped up when you feel like they can do better, or when they feel like you can make the energy a little bit stronger. Because we feed off the crowd. Like we have a good time regardless, but if we see the rest of the room like just going absolutely crazy, we're gonna go that much harder. Mostly just that, you know, make it seem, at least seem like you're having a good time if you're not. But the biggest thing is like energizing the room and like really giving everybody that showed up the show that they, you know, came to see.
Right. Were there any vocalists or frontmen that you kind of looked up to in that? Because starting that late, it isn't like you kind of had these images of certain vocalists maybe in your youth. So were there certain people that you kind of thought, well, I want to be like that?
I literally stole everything I know from everybody else. Well, I was thrown to the wolves, so I had to learn really fast. So I watched everybody that I thought was great, and I was like, I like what he does. I like that. Let's use that. Oh, he does this. Let's use that one too. But I would say, obviously, Jake Lors from August Burns Red. You got Levi Benton from Miss May I. Jason Butler, Let Live, which is now became, I think, mostly Fever. Fever 55, 55, or whatever. 33. Fever 33.
I think. Yeah, I spoke to those guys.
Yeah. Yes. 3 or 5, one of the other 3. Who else? Dave Stevens was on that same tour. I'm thinking of all the vocalists I saw on Warped Tour, my first tour. Issues. There's a lot of good bands. There's a lot of bands that have little nuances and unique things that I was like, oh man, there's so much talent out there. I gotta see what I'm about.
And then musically, joining ERRA, what did you feel you could contribute to the band in that sense, and in terms of kind of heading into maybe a new direction or evolving what they were already doing?
Hopefully good screams, but mostly I feel like I'm a pretty lively, upbeat guy, but I also don't take everything too seriously.
Okay.
So finding that balance between like having as much fun as you can and not taking it too seriously, but also showing, like, making it look like at least that we are, you know, a band to be reckoned with, you know?
Right. And then talking about all these kind of the road and live shows, as a depressing segue, how difficult is it now to not be able to experience that and not get that feedback from people?
It sucks. But we feel like half of our jobs are missing. Well, I mean, half of our jobs are definitely missing. And the biggest thing is, like, with all this new music out, and, you know, we've only been able to do half of our work. We've only been able to just write and listen. We want to be able to perform, because that's going to be a whole new skill set I'm going to have to figure out. Like, I haven't had a lot of really any practice with some of these songs in a live setting yet. So
sure.
I'll have to see if I'm worth the juice is worth the squeeze, you know?
But it's the live show in the back of your mind, collectively as a band when you write?
Always.
Okay.
Not always. For me, it is, because if I write something after I record it, I'm thinking that's gonna hurt. So I try to leave myself some space to actually be able to, you know, make it human.
Some practical
yeah,
decisions.
practical, right?
when it comes to the lyrics, then is that your cup of tea? And then do you write your own lyrics in a sense, or is it a collective thing that you do?
It used to be I attempted to make it one-sided because I wanted to try to do it by myself, but
Okay.
actually more recently, especially this last record, we found out that Jesse and I do it together.
Okay.
But more recently we've just assumed to split it evenly. He'll let me go as far as I want with the song and my parts, but I'm more than happy to have him do all of it, or 50% or 20%. It doesn't really matter to me, because at the end of the day, we decided that we just want the best product. I'm not protective over my parts. I love trying to do it all on my own because I'm very stubborn and prideful, but I do think that Jesse, he writes great stuff for me. Like, if I don't help him at all, I'll be just fine.
Sure.
You know?
Well, because what I was thinking about listening to this new self-titled record was, what kind of mindset were either you or the band collectively in as you were writing those songs, and both musically and lyrically?
A mindset. Well, we were definitely more excited this time around.
Okay.
It was an easier experience than normal because we had way more preparation and time to do this last record. He was writing demos for the band, and Alex was writing demo drums. Like, we had a lot of songs as a demo in like demo form before we even got to the studio. So I was prepared with like knowing what it was going to kind of sound like beforehand. And we were in a really comfortable studio and a nice spot, and our producers were awesome. So we had all the right ingredients to write a good record on a practical standpoint. The hardest part is getting there and like not hitting writer's block and feeling like you're worth a damn, and the stuff that you're writing is worth a damn. But everything went really well. It's usually very, for me, it's usually stressful because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be great and do great. But for whatever reason, this time around was just so much more enjoyable. Thankfully.
Yeah, because what you mentioned, I find interesting, because how I see creativity is that kind of doubt is inherently attached to creativity, because you're trying to share something that's very personal.
I have a lot of doubt. Maybe Jesse doesn't. I know we're both very hard on ourselves to make great content every time. So it's sometimes hard not to get discouraged. It's like, is this good enough? But sometimes you just got to relax and trust the process.
This might be difficult to, because I'm sure it differs for different types of outings and songs, but what is in a way your criteria? How do you measure what you do in a way?
Oh man, that's a good question. Hopefully some variety if you can. Because sometimes I'll catch myself writing the same lyrics I've written before. And can't do that again. Just trying to come in with a new approach to things. Not just for the band, just for yourself too. Like, man, I've done stuff like that before. Is there a version of this I can do that's slightly different from what I would usually write? Kind of, it's hard to keep raising the bar, but like really you kind of have to. Sure. Or else you're going to write the same record over and over.
Well, it's interesting that you say kind of raising the bar, because I read somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but where this new album was kind of described as a new chapter for the band, as a new kind of, and also wrote down music written for musicians, that it was kind of, in terms of the musicality, technicality, that it was, if you're a musician, then maybe you can appreciate it even more. So what was the approach then going into this new, I don't know if direction is the right word, but this new phase of the band?
That musician's comment is difficult too, because while it's fun to be a musician's band, a band's band, as we say, that's not always accessible for a lot of people. Because you might write something that's really cool for another guitarist who's familiar with this stuff, but to like a wider audience, that might be like too complicated, or they may not get it the way you intended. But ERRA's always been a technical band, and we didn't want to like throw that out the window, but we want to have kind of classic song structure and really accessible metalcore. So finding that balance is always interesting. And I feel like we did a pretty good job this time around. There's a lot of really weird stuff, but I feel like a lot of really familiar things as well. There's always the groove, there's always the headbang, there's always a solo. Lots of cool harmonies, lots of fun, like noodle-y parts and sections for guitar. A lot more scream dynamics this time around.
In a way, I think there's also there's kind of a, how would you say, a thread through the record where it starts out a certain way and then it moves into, I would say, around the halfway point. There's more melodic elements coming in, and especially with songs like Lunar Halo and Vanished Canvas, those are sonically somewhat different. So what was the goal, so to say, in terms of compiling a collection of songs for this?
For us, the order on the album is very purposeful. There's meant to be like a flow to it. I think Jesse has like a more specific methodology when we're doing placement, but I know we try not to like front what we say is front load the album. We try to have like an even spread, like a progression, you know, so when you get to the back half of the record, you're not feeling like you already listened to all the good songs, you know.
And you mentioned
heavy slow kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, that I wrote, especially in Electric Twilight as well. There's a lot of dynamics within that song itself. So that was definitely a point of emphasis then, I suppose, that to kind of like you say, mix it up a little bit.
There's a couple songs that definitely feel like they're connected or they were written together, which wasn't intentional. It actually, there might have been two songs maybe, but like as far as like whatever songs went together, I don't think there was any songs written meant to be back to back, but they just ended up that way.
Okay.
Some songs had slight ending changes to make the transitions into the next one more fluid, but that was like done very much later.
Right. Well, you mentioned as a songwriter, you don't want to repeat yourself. You don't want to keep writing down the same line. So, and this might be, I don't know if you can say this about your own songs, but what was one song that you were quite impressed by, but what you came up with?
I think House of Glass is my favorite song on the record. I think that song is so fun. It's so fast paced and like driving. It's also really heavy, and I'm a sucker for the heavy songs. The time signatures are really complicated. That's definitely a musician song, but the chorus is like very different from what ERRA would normally write. It's like kind of more anthemic and more metal.
Okay.
Which I feel like complements the rest of the song really well. Lots of tool riffs in there.
I wrote down one line, or I don't know if it's a line, but post-fundamentalist humiliation. Where did that come from?
God, I don't even know. That whole section was difficult because when you have like a really super technical part, I usually just like, hey, Jesse, I don't understand what's happening here, so you should do this section. I'm pretty sure that was one of them. I'd have to look up all the lyrics. But the whole song is like a hold on, House of Glass. This is so bad. The whole song is about like kind of like social things and a little bit of political things. We try not to be too political with our content, but we're not like unaware.
Sure.
But there's a lot of like kind of like fight the power, like man against the system type of vibes on this song. And that whole section is like this kind of chaotic and related to that. There's some very brainy words in that song for sure.
Well, it's interesting that you say that.
Starved, you know.
Well, because with some of the songs I wrote down poetic, that I thought the lyrics were very poetic, and at times I had to pull up a dictionary to find out what certain words
Dictionary
meant.
core.
No,
The
but
new ERRA record.
what I found interesting is, for instance, with Lunar Halo or something, how do these is it almost like writing a poem in a way?
Oh, for sure. The song will, at least for me, the song will like kind of dictate where the, like, I always write to an instrumental. I want the instrumental, I want the lyrics and the vocals involved with the instrumental to complement the song. I
Right.
find it much easier to be inspired by music than just come in with like a theme or an idea and trying to like make a puzzle piece fit in a puzzle that it wasn't intended for.
Mm. Because well, one other thing I found with the lyrics, and this is more kind of an encompassing thing, but you mentioned kind of there's a little bit of political in there, but I also felt there was a lot of self-reflection and kind of trying to figure out the confusion and the uncertainty of the world of today. Is that fair to say?
Sure. I mean, there's a whole, I'm looking at these lyrics, there's a whole section that I wrote about like being too reliant and like almost being like too trustworthy and not thinking for yourself or forming your own opinion. You're just like blindly following. And like a sweep of the nation like by a misguided hand could be a line interpreted like that you're just blindly following a leader or a ruler who you
Right.
is perceived to be good or like perceived to be correct, but it's a distorted divine is the next line. Like it's like a distortive image of what's meant to be like pure and holy. And then the following line is collective suicide. There's a pretty intense line. Just like the idea of just you guys are all walking into doom, you know?
Yeah, no, I think there's even in Electric Twilight you mentioned the Aokigahara
Aokigahara sayonara.
yeah, the suicide forest. I couldn't find the word forest, but there's some darkness on it, but it didn't feel all dark. The album
that song is more tongue-in-cheek and goofy than House of Glass, which is this is actually the first record we've really done that. Like we used to take it more, we definitely still take it seriously, but we had a lot more fun with like the goofy lyrics on this record, which I feel like we've never done before. We had moments where like that's such a weird line, but we're definitely going to use it, you know? I think before we wouldn't have done that.
But is there a sort of an art in being cryptic in a way?
Yeah, for ERRA, for sure. What does it mean? It's for you to find out, man.
I can imagine. Does it work on yourself as well? Do songs change in terms of themes and kind of your own understanding of them over time?
Maybe. I don't know if that's a good thing, because sometimes it can feel like you're kind of like, we'll figure it out later, you know? I'm not even worried about what this actually means. So we try to write stuff that maybe if it sounds cryptic to you, it still has like there still was like a source of meaning or a source of like emotion that we're not just like winging it.
Right.
But
right.
the cryptic nature is fun though. Because we don't like to be super specific, because we know people that listen to our music believe a lot of things, and we want you to have your own interpretation and connection to the song. We mostly just want it to be fun, you know? We don't want it to be like too preachy or too on the nose.
Yeah, is that ultimately why you started looking for this creative outlet, as you mentioned, when you're around 21, that I just want to have fun and do something that I enjoy?
Yeah, that, and I missed being good at something, you know?
Okay.
I was a good swimmer, like I'm not gonna lie. I was good. And when I didn't have that to do anymore, I needed something for myself. I was like, I need to be good at something again. You know? I don't feel fulfilled. I feel like I'm wasting a talent that I haven't tried yet, and
Right.
I hated feeling that way.
Well,
I
but
wanted to contribute to something.
I've also heard from people who play in bands that once they're in a band, and especially once you hit those touring cycles, that your identity becomes very much linked to that thing that you do, that band, and then kind of your position within that band. And now that
That's
that's
true.
sort of fallen away for the past year, how have you, has that affected you in a way, in terms of identity or in terms of
You know, I probably haven't thought about that as much until just now.
oh, sorry.
No, it's good. I guess. I mean, I definitely feel like a part of me is missing now that I've done it for so long. I mean, yeah, it's again, it goes back to like we're only doing half of our job, so you know, I'm still me. Like my identity isn't just
Sure.
rah.
Well, let me ask it in a more positive way then. What have you done this past year outside of making music, just to yeah, just to ground yourself in a way?
Well, probably the most important thing isn't even related to the answer. The pandemic and this opportunity of this sounds weird. This opportunity of loss has kind of created a reality check.
Mm.
So it makes you realize how important it is when you lose something like that, and what you do to get that back, or what you do when you get knocked off the horse to get back on. So if anything, this has all been a learning experience because nobody has been through this before. We're all learning together,
Right.
especially for bands. So learning to navigate the terrain in times like this has been the real experience that we've all done. I've picked up some hobbies and habits to, you know, enjoy the pandemic, but most of this has just been like a learning experience and how to survive, you know.
Right. Final question then, and I don't know what the rules are in the States at the moment, and I suppose it's different for each state as well, but what are the, what does it look like in terms of being able to play in somewhere in the future?
So some states are slowly removing, well, everybody's getting the vaccine. Some of the vaccine rollouts are slower than others. But some states are doing removal of the mask ordinance, so it's not required, but a lot of people are still doing it. My state will be removing the mask ordinance, I think, next month.
Okay.
Um, so I still think it's kind of trial and error, which is kind of scary, a
Right.
gamble to play. But if the professionals say it's okay, then we'll follow them. We're supposed to play a small, well, not actually, it's not really supposed to be small. We're supposed to play a pretty big metal festival in Alabama in
Okay.
September, which is, I think it's 6 months from now. So hopefully the state of COVID allows for that to happen successfully and safely.
Mm.
I mean, I'm at the point where we haven't played for so long. I'll wait as long as it takes to make it like correct and safe for everybody.
Sure.
We're not gonna just play a show because we might be allowed to and we were supposed to. We're gonna play a show when it's the right time and nobody has to feel like they're doing something bad just to show up, you know?
Sure. Well, it sounds good, and I hope you get
Yeah.
to do that very
Me
soon.
too.
Then.
Me too.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. You're
Thank
welcome.
you.